Good morning and welcome to the Core Connection. I'm Mira Rubin here with you on Enlightened World Network. And today's topic is looking into the future. And when we imagine the future, is it a dystopian nightmare where humans are subjugated to machines and AI? Or is it a future where humanity has learned to work in concert with nature and is using our technology to serve that end? It should be a really engaging, interesting conversation. And before we get started, good morning, Rosalind, and good morning to everybody else who's joining us. It's great to have you here with us this morning on this Friday, another week flying by. But we're going to talk about looking into the future. And before we do that, let's take a couple minutes to get present. Let's take a deep breath in through your nose and hold it. And imagine clean, crisp oxygen flooding your lungs, flowing into your bloodstream, nourishing all your cells, all your organs, bringing vital life energy to your body and being. And as you exhale any tension, stress, negativity, fatigue. And now let's take another deep breath in through your nose and hold it. This time, imagine brilliant, bright light, lighting you up from the inside out, illuminating, electrifying, and energizing all your cells, all your molecules, your electrons, creating a brilliant beam of light and energy from your heart out into the world. And as you exhale any remaining tension, stress, negativity, fatigue. And now let's press our palms together, vigorously rub our hands together to feel the friction, the temperature, the pressure, the motion, and the tickling and tingling when you stop. And allow all those sensations to bring you present right here, right now, into this remarkable physical form that enables you to experience life. Welcome, welcome, welcome. So, into the future. This topic is coming up because last night on movie night, we aired a presentation by a futurist and had a really engaging conversation afterward about this vision of the future and how I think it's so fascinating how our vision of the future is a projection of the past in so many ways. And we, I guess of necessity, we imagine a future based on the way that life has occurred for us, the way that inside the paradigms that exist. For instance, one of the big concerns about the future has to do with AI, right? And AI taking our jobs and displacing humans and then taking over humanity and subjugating humanity, using our bodies for battery, to mine our bodies for power so that they can persist. And let's see. Rosalind says, is there any evidence where in the body is consciousness located? AI cannot replace consciousness. Thank you, Rosalind. I so appreciate that. So I don't know about anything about locating consciousness physically in the body. I have heard things about when people die, there's a shift in weight of a certain parameter that seemed to be consistent. I don't know if that's true. And maybe that's the weight of the soul. I have no idea, but that's a really interesting thought. One of the things that I thought about in our conversation last night is that I can't imagine that unless there were a way for AI to become conscious, to become sentient, and there, who knows, maybe there is, I don't know. But without that, I can't imagine that laughter, that true joy or love or emotion is something that would be replicatable in AI. I think it could be mimicked, but I don't believe that it can be replicated for in reality. And so we're, with AI, we're creating these marvelous mimics that also have greater computing capacity or information capacity than we do, but they don't. Emotion is a whole other realm. Again, they can mimic it, I would imagine, but the actual energy of emotion, I'm thinking that perhaps it's an entirely different thing. Although as I'm saying that, I'm thinking of energetic frequencies and emotions having frequency. And if that's the case, then perhaps it would be possible at some point to include energetic frequency. I don't know. It's a very, very fascinating question. So the question is, if AI is going to be so much more competent at so many things than humans are, what's our role? And so many people are frightened of our jobs being taken away, right? Because who are we without our jobs? And so this is a really interesting thing, like we think about how there would be mass poverty, and the thing about that is that it's based on those kinds of projections are based on assumptions of the way that the world currently operates. We work for a living. We work, we get paid, we pay for things, we struggle, we suffer, we survive, we thrive, all of these different things based on an economy that is kind of based on wage slavery in its way, right? Where we trade life energy for money. And so it was really interesting in watching this projection from a futurist. He was talking to a grocery association, about automation and all of that, and talking about, if you do your job like a machine's going to take over your job. But the interesting thing is that if we get to a place where we can have the work of creating things and managing environments, of doing all these different things, if we can have a lot of that mechanized, the question is, what is our purpose? And so this is an interesting thing. I mean, I imagine that there would be no more wages, that people wouldn't need to work anymore. And so if people don't need to work anymore, and there's bounty for everyone, if there was enough for everyone, and I don't mean just enough in terms of scarcity, I mean truly enough for everyone, what would humans be about? What's our function? And I think that this is a really valuable question. I mean, what would it be like to not have to do all the stuff that we do? Like we're kind of enslaved in our jobs, working to pay for things that that we need to live, right? So what if that weren't the case? I didn't see people entertaining that. Like, what if there were a universal income? What if there were enough food for everybody, and quality food and choices and all of that? Then then human beings would be able to be enjoying life and hopefully connecting with nature. In so many of these like futuristic cities, there's no nature. It's like all industrial or all manufactured to such a great degree. It's not about nature. And I'm imagining that people would be able to be reconnecting with each other, reconnecting with storytelling, with making meals together, with doing creative ventures, to be pursuing the passion of their hearts, the song of their soul. And I think it means stepping out of this whole notion of how identified we are with the work that we do. The work that we do is how we have defined ourselves and defined our worth. And what if we don't have to do any work anymore? What if we just get to be by virtue of just being here? And this is a conversation that we've had before outside of the context of thinking of the future. And this is a conversation we've had before saying, well, what if we were sufficient in and of ourselves? What might we do? What might we engage in if we didn't have to prove ourselves, if we didn't have to, if we weren't caught in this notion of survival, if everything were taken care of, then what would we do? And many people believe that we would just go down the tubes, like what we would be meaningless and purposeless. And I venture to say maybe not. Maybe we would be expanding into a new level of creativity and connection. Maybe we would be able to be cultivating higher powers of awareness and perception and connected experience. And so what if we were to create a future that's based on that kind of notion? What would that look like? What might be possible if, rather than the warlike, competition-driven paradigm, we moved into this other paradigm of satisfaction, satiety, enough, because it's enough that is true abundance, right? It was very interesting. One of the people that attended last night is a writer and writes futuristic stories. And they said in their stories, humans were constrained from going into wild places. They were prohibited from going into wild places. The cities were surrounded by trees that created a barrier between the human environments and nature. And I said, I used to think that way. I used to, and I still see where the way that we're behaving is like a plague on the planet in so many ways. I mean, in the Matrix, they talked about humans as a virus that was just spreading all over the planet. And in certain ways, I see that that's how we behave. And I also recognize that we are part of nature. And it's this notion of separation that from nature that has enabled us to perpetrate so much of the violence that we have on our beloved planet and the natural world. It's through this sense of separation from nature that that we've been able to rape and pillage her so relentlessly. And so what if we were to be able to cultivate a deeper connection with nature, an honoring and a cherishing and a respect and a collaboration with nature, rather than abusing and dominating and trying to control and commoditize. And so what about a future like that? You know, it was also very interesting. This person was talking, the futurist was talking about vertical farming and building buildings that would be producing food. And I thought, you know, that's a really interesting idea. And is that in addition to naturally cultivating the land in a way that it is serving nature? I didn't hear anything in this person's presentation about nurturing the planet, like how we were going to revivify the parts of the planet that we have laid to waste. So welcome, Kimberly. So good to have you here with us this morning. And Ross, what we're talking about is looking into the future and being alert to the kind of future we're creating and preparing ourselves for that future, you know, preparing ourselves in terms of cultivating a sense of meaning and purpose within ourselves. So Rosalind says, I agree. If there's more freedom to spend time other than working, then people could find other outlets to explore self and worth. I would be doing more gardening, reading, and making strengthening connections. Exactly. And so if we can find a new approach to economies and economics, if we can create the abundance so that we don't have the slavery that we currently live with, where we are all working to make a living, to pay for the things that we need to live, I'm quite certain that there's another way for us to be able to be on the planet where we have set up systems that provide abundantly for everyone. And that then gives us freedom to be. This is not necessarily a drive toward a dystopian future, but a future where we could have the potential or have the possibility to be living into our potentials, and that those potentials are not defined by our jobs per se. You know, that we don't need to be becoming something. We don't have to be guiding how we live our lives by our ability to generate money. What would it be like if we could be expressed as humans, like to connect with a deeper sense of purpose and passion? And I'm trying to, I find it so interesting. I was just talking about how this futurist was talking about 3D printed meat, for example. So we don't have to be farming with animals anymore and having all the issues around that, ecologically, morally, whatever. We could all be eating laboratory meat that is 3D printed and cultured from animals, for example. And I don't know about you, but that doesn't have a great appeal to me. I'm not a meat eater, but I don't know that has a great appeal. There are all kinds of plant-based meat substitutes now. I don't know how healthy they are. It's interesting to me that in imagining the future, people often imagine that technology is going to solve our future for us and solve all the ills that we face on the planet. And what I'm here to say is that technology is a tool, and a tool is only as good as the person and the context from which it's being used. So for instance, if you're a hammer, then everything's a nail. And so with our existing paradigm of being a hammer, we have our predilections for how we're going to use our technology, and it's not necessarily for the betterment of things. We have a paradigm of reductionist thinking that unless we transform it, we're going to be moving ourselves into further devastation, as far as I can tell. That what is called for is systems thinking, looking at the broader picture, looking at the complexities of interaction between all different forms of life. Like, we think that we can replicate the quality of food by 3D printing it. Like, what is that going to do to our bodies? We think that we understand the complexity of nutrition because we break it down into chemicals and different nutrients, but we don't necessarily know, there's there's life force energy that is in food, that I wonder if food grown from the soil, what the difference energetically is in food grown from the soil versus food grown from a test tube, so to speak, without soil, with chemicals, with chemical fertilizers or manufactured fertilizers, rather than we know the some of the ramifications of using chemical fertilizers in soil. So why would that be better if we were growing food in test tubes? There's so much that we don't know, and part of the paradigm shift that I think has to happen, or that I hope for, is that we adjust our hubris and our arrogance to become more humble in the face of the wisdom of nature that has developed over millions of years. So Rosalind says, healthcare and wellness, maybe in the future it would be easy as going into a phone booth to boost energy with light. Exactly. There are all kinds of really, really fascinating health things that are happening with light and energy and frequency. Lots of studies with light. Let me think, what do they call it? Photobiomodulation, which is using light targeted to the brain to activate different portions of the brain, and is being used in treatments around, or studies around, treatment for Alzheimer's and dementia and depression and OCD, all kinds of things that where energy pulses are being utilized for healing purposes with effect. So that's pretty amazing thing, to be able to activate our own healing capabilities, through energy, through stem cell stimulation and mitochondrial stimulation. There's so many wonderful areas of development there outside of the pharmaceutical realm. In fact, the pharmaceutical companies have been fighting tooth and nail against stem cell technologies because stem cell technologies are so powerful and remarkable in their healing function that it threatens a lot of the pharmaceutical, well, the whole pharmaceutical paradigm, really. So Rosalind says landfills might be in the business of cultivating waste, eating microbes to break down organic material and melting metals. So I love that, Rosalind. They've discovered bacteria and mushrooms that eat radioactivity, that eat plastic. And so what if we can solve all these issues and we can use technology in that regard to be naturalizing our earth rather than mechanizing things, right? To reverse the damage that we have done, to rewild the planet, I mean, there's so many possibilities. It's just interesting to me that I think some of the people who are futurists are also still prey to the existing paradigm. And I think that if we're going to imagine a future, we get to step outside of that kind of linear thought, that there's a whole other dimension of potential and possibility that we can step into. And so we get to design the future that we're growing into. And now is the time to be doing that. Now is the time to be laying the groundwork for that future and being present to the values that will guide it appropriately. To guide it in a greater context that is not necessarily anthropomorphic, that is not necessarily human centered, where we can be inclusive with the natural world that we are part of. So, oh, Rosalind, you're on a roll here. I love it. So Rosalind says shopping items would be teleported. Well, maybe the whole notion of shopping would be different. Maybe we would have our own little devices that would be creating whatever needed to be created, that would be transforming one material into another material. Who knows? I mean, there's all kinds of possibility. I love that idea of being teleported. And yeah, so very, very, very interesting things to think about. This futurist person said we should be spending an hour a day thinking about the future. And I thought that was a very interesting invitation. Anyway, thank you. Rosalind says, have a good weekend. I wish you all a great weekend. I'm Mira Rubin. This is the Core Connection. And I go live here on the Enlightened World Network Facebook page and YouTube channel each weekday morning at 9 a.m. Eastern. And please, please check out the other wonderful programming on Enlightened World Network and Enlightened World Living. And I look forward to seeing you again here, hopefully next week. And until